Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Once again, coming at you from Studio West. Our studio is deconstructed right now. I mean, I ought to put in a picture of what it looks like. It's pretty rough. Jacob, how you doing?
Doing well. Turkey season's here. Hey, listen, public land season's open, so got a good bit to talk about, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. What's that you got behind your ear there, big fella?
Where'd it go? Alabama straw call. All the YouTube people can see this. Yeah.
Let's hit it. Come on.
Sounds terrible.
No, that sounded good. Dude, I'll tell you what. That sound in the wood, the first time I ever heard someone use like a trumpet or a wingbone style call was when I was hunting with Wayne Lackey, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And we were hunting up in the hills and mountains somewhere. Mm-hmm. And he pulled that thing out, and the first time he yelped on it, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, it sounds because I'd heard him like at the NWTF convention. I'm like, that doesn't even really sound that much like a turkey. Mm-hmm. But you get it in the woods and how it like reverbs and echoes. It is legit, man.
It's loud.
Yeah, it's super impressive.
To me, it's easier. I still got to learn how to call quietly on it. I've been practicing my clucks on the actual wingbone, but to me, it's easier to do loud yelps on it than soft yelps. And then clucks aren't terribly hard. It's just more like mouth control and air control. But when Joe told me before we did the podcast, Monday's episode, before we did the podcast, he told me, he's like, oh yeah, you can kiki on them, you can purr on them. And I had him trying to show me kind of how you do it, but I've been trying to purr. It's not worked out great.
Rough.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to answer some listener Q&As in this episode. I'm going to put links in the show notes for those timestamps. As you can tell, my voice is just about gone because I've been hollering at these turkeys so much, buddy. We were actually going to do this podcast 2 days ago, and my voice was gone. Like, it didn't make it home. Like, we were already here, and I was like, I don't know if I can make it through this. And by the time I made it home, it was, like, gone. And when I woke up the next morning, it was, like, gone. Nothing. So it's been a rough couple days.
It's a little squeaky toy over here.
Yeah, pretty much. It's been pretty embarrassing. It's been pretty bad, but man. Anyways, we're gonna update on some hunts, and then we're gonna get to some listener Q&As. We're gonna answer some deer Q&As today. Kind of getting back into some deer content. And hey, we were talking about our relaunch into deer content in a couple weeks. We got some stuff lined up that we're pretty excited about. Kind of like we talked about with the turkey stuff. If you have any deer-specific questions, we already got a pretty big backlog. But if you've got deer-specific questions over the next couple weeks, make sure you write those in because we're going to be getting some guys on here in the next probably 3 or 4 weeks after this airs to start recording deer content out. And if y'all got some good questions, we'll ask our future guests those questions and kind of incorporate that as much as we can. So make sure you write those in. Also, we've been getting some listener success stories sent in. We're going to get those posted. We got some turkey ones. We've also got a big back catalog of deer listener success stories from last year that we never posted. So if you sent one in like maybe sometime in early January or after, then it hadn't been posted yet. We're kind of hanging on to those to hit that on-ramp here in a couple weeks. We're going to start rolling through those suckers, and I'm really excited about that, man. Yeah. Nothing like some good listener success stories rolling in. And someone actually just wrote in one from South Florida.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they killed a stud.
The guy's wife.
Hammer.
Yeah.
When I first saw it, I'm like, I don't know, my mind just immediately goes like, oh, yeah, it's probably in. A lot of them that we get are from Georgia and Alabama. But then I scrolled to the next picture, and there's like the palmettos and everything. And I was like, oh, where are they? And I started reading through it. I'm like, oh, man, it does not look like a South Florida deer. It is a nice one. Anyways, Jacob, what's been new with you?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. So we went out. So I'm trying to think, what was the last update we talked about? We hunted the club. We didn't really talk about in detail. When we had Joe on, we talked a little bit about a hunt we had, I think from that morning, where we had 2 birds we located mid to late morning and ended up setting up on those turkeys 3 separate times, 3 separate ways. And the first setup we had was probably second setup we had was probably the closest It was for sure the closest we got them because you could hear spitting and drumming. You could hear drumming.
Yeah.
And I was set up a little bit further back from me. I couldn't hear it at that point. But those turkeys just did not want to leave that flat, man.
Yeah, I think I might just I think I might put in the screenshot of our track of how we set up on them because it looks like a 3-leaf clover.
Yeah.
How we set up because we struck them and then we moved and then we moved again and it literally we just clover leafed around them. 3 different setups. They would not come off that little flat. Another update. On the last outro, we talked about the fella in the club that beat us to the spot we wanted to hunt.
Your arch nemesis.
My nemesis. Well, so that podcast aired, and about, I don't know, lunchtime the next day, when it aired, I get a text from a random number. He's like, hey, man, my name's so-and-so. My buddy listens to your show, and he said y'all are talking about me. Nice to meet you. I was like, oh, man, what's up? And so I talked to him. He's super cool from just the text exchange we had. You know, I told him, I was like, hey, man, I hope I run into you out there. He's like, yeah, I got to get out there early, you know, and stay that long if I'm going to kill anything because I'm just a duck hunter waiting on or passing time. And I was like, man, anybody who gets out there that early and stays that late has my respect. That's super legit. So that was a cool encounter. So we now officially know that at least one person in the club knows about the podcast.
Outside of Cody,
of course. So yeah,
and Sam.
I don't know.
Mike.
I don't know if Matt's listening to this, but if you are, please don't tell anybody else in the club.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm gonna be dropping screenshots on here. Which these are the same birds. So these birds were in the spot that he was pinned out at on opening morning, and killed his bird in. So Cody was getting pictures of a group of 5 toms in that area. And he got one yesterday. He sent me, and there's 4 toms in it now. So I'm like, yep, that must be the one old boy killed. Miss him. But yeah, they're still together, running with hens.
Oh, man.
Hanging out.
Yeah. Well, with the club and everything, I was talking about this with I ran into Nick Harris at a restaurant last week, and we were talking about deer turkey hunting. He was showing me his club he's in, and the birds they had on that place, and I was like, "Oh my god, dude!" Just trail cam photos of I mean, I couldn't count all the turkeys. I'll be honest on these food plots and gobblers galore. I'm like, dude, you better kill some, and then let me know if there's an opening next year or after.
Is Nick a big turkey hunter?
I didn't think he turkey hunted, to be honest. And I kind of brought that up to him. I'm like, I didn't know you even turkey hunted. And I guess so. But he said he was going to try to get out there and hunt some this week and see if he could, get a bird. Also, some great news. I'll tell you real quick. Some of you guys out here might not care all that much, but Alabama's in the Final Four, baby.
Oh my gosh.
Roll Tide!
We're not a basketball school.
Hey, Auburn said that when y'all won the SEC championship, we're a basketball school. And then y'all lost in the tournament. Now it was like, we're a basketball school
hey,
now.
Dude, listen. I grew up an Alabama fan.
I know.
I grew up, and then I went to Auburn. So I did the thing, and I switched over. I don't care. I I watch sports casually, but the more I get into Auburn football, or just Auburn athletics. I think I told you the other day after we lost in the Final Four. I heard someone else say I didn't come up with, or not Final Four in the tournament. Whatever. I'm sick, and I heard this from someone else. But it was like, when I die, I want my pallbearers to dress up as Aubie so they can let me down one more time.
Which is the mascot.
Aubie's the mascot, so Auburn can let me down one last time.
Yeah,
War Eagle. That's terrible.
Yeah, good stuff. No, so I went hunting. So Monday was the opener for public, and I'm trying to think. Did we hunted the club? I'm trying to think. Did we hunt the club any over the weekend? Everything's a blur now.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think it was just that last time we went out was you. Well, you went out.
I went out with Sam and Blakely, and I was trying to get them a bird. We went straight to where I hunted. And killed my bird last year out there, and set up before. This is actually where me and you called in the gobbler the other day that we talked about with Joe, and we started there, and we heard a couple gobbles. They were gobbling right off that ridge point, right where they're supposed to be,
like right in that spot.
Yeah, and we got set up on them, and they flew down, kind of went quiet. Nothing ever came in. So we ended up backing out of that spot and we went to a different area. There's a food plot that these birds have been hanging out in and just a general block of woods they've been hanging out in. And I didn't have that long to hunt. So I was like, we might have till about 10, 11 o'clock at the latest. So we walk up to this food plot and you could see it from a distance. And I kind of get up and crawl up there and get my binos and peer down into the field. And there's 2 hens walking around feeding. I'm like, okay, so there's hens here. There's probably gobblers somewhere pretty close. They're not in the field, but they're probably like 10 yards off the field in the woods. So there's actually a pine thicket right there. And I was like, hey guys, we're going through this pine thicket.
This is the same field that me and Mike sat on?
Yes.
Oh, you walked through that pine thicket?
Yes.
I'm sure y'all scared every turkey out there, didn't y'all?
No.
What? That looks thick as crap, dude.
You're such a sissy.
The one
Yeah, Jacob done got soft.
the one next to the shooting house?
That ain't that thick.
Dude, where me and Mike were sitting, I thought about, I'm like, if you had to walk through that, you'd make so much racket.
Are we talking about the same pine thicket? I mean, it's thick, but it's not that thick.
They look thick. But anyways, keep going.
Are you talking about the shooting house way up on the hill?
Uh-huh.
And you look down on the food plot?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, dude, no. No.
Well, down by
This isn't even a thicket you would rabbit hunt.
well, down by where the field was at, it looked thick as crap.
Well, it gets a little thicker once you get down to the edges, which we found out.
Uh-huh,
But we
okay.
go swinging through there. By the way, no deer sign in there. I mean, I found one rub and one like little basketball scrape on one of the ridge points, but we swung up and hit a ridge point in the pine thicket. And this pine thicket's starting to age out, so it's getting to what we call stem exclusion, meaning the pines have grown up to a point where the canopies are growing into each other and they're shading out everything underneath. So all the briars and just random stuff growing under there, all the thicket forming plants are kind of dead. There's still some briars in it, but they're kind of few and far between, and you can just step on them and move them out of the way and kind of bob and weave and go through that stuff. And so we go through there. Again, just no deer sign. It was kind of depressing. I was like, man, interesting. But it's good to know, like going and walking through there. Not any good trails. There was one whip rub in it with a little basketball scrape. That was it. And basically what we did is the food plot lies on a power line, and we walked back up the power line and swung into the pine thicket, and we were using the pine thicket to get down in the bottom that they were in, because the way it is, there's like a hill that goes down, and the food plot's right in the bottom of the hill, and there's a creek that runs right through it, makes a T. And so the creek kind of tees off and goes through the food plot. So we were going and getting in the same creek bottom as them. And so we swing down there and we ease down into that bottom, and we get in there, and it looks fantastic. It looks so good. And we crawl up, and Sam and Blakely are both pretty new to turkey hunting, and we kind of ease up. I'm like, hey, don't grab any saplings, don't shake any limbs or anything like that. And we set up. I'm like, we're just gonna sit right here and listen for a minute and just kind of be a little bit passive. I do a little bit of soft calling, nothing answers. We give it maybe 10 minutes. And so I get out my ceramic call, and I mean, I kind of like rip on it a little bit. I do like, yep, pop, 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 yep. Boom, they just gobble right up there at the field. I was like, I knew they were right there.
Wait, really?
Oh, dude, they hammered two of them.
Okay, you didn't tell me this hunt. Okay.
So 2 of them hammer right up there by that field. I was saving this. And as soon as they gobble, the hens start yelping, and I'm cranking on that thing. I'm going back and forth with the hens, and I'm sitting kind of to the left, and Sam and Blake are both to my right, and they're both kind of like looking at me. I was like, face that way, get your gun up, because I don't know if they're coming or not. And they get their guns up and everything, and we wait for 10, 15, or we wait for about 20 minutes, and nothing else happens. And so I'm like kind of getting a little impatient, because now it's getting to be like 10 o'clock, and I got to go soon. So I'm like, okay, we're going to make something happen here. And ideally in that situation, you just sit on them and you just wait and see what happens. Like if I had all day, that's what I would do at least. And I've killed a good many turkeys doing that, but I was like, I'm going to see what happens here. So after about 30 minutes, I get the ceramic call back out, and I do another aggressive calling sequence on it. And then a bird gobbles in front of us to our left. So that ridge point kind of comes down and drops where me and you hunted on opening week. Right where that ridge point drops off in the bottom, one hammers right there. So I was like, okay. And we give him like 5 minutes. He gobbles again. And so I was like, y'all face that way. And well, like they turn over and like scooch, and Sam's sitting there like this, like kind of leaned back. I was like, Sam, I was like, get up, get your gun up. And so he like kind of puts his gun up and he's sitting there like that. And I was like, no, like get on your gun, you know? And so he gets on his gun, and like a couple minutes goes by, and I call again, and he hammers it, and he's cut the distance in half. I was like, oh, it's about to happen, boy. Now the disadvantage to this spot is the bottom is pretty flat, but in between us and the turkey is a little rise, and kind of similar to where we called in the gobbler that we talked about with Joe. He was getting close, but he wouldn't cross the creek. There's, I mean, just a little bitty creek. This actually plays right into what Joe was talking about. There's a little bitty creek right there. You can just step right across it. And he got to the edge of that creek and would not come any further. And so we sit on him for like, at this point, it's probably like 10:45. It's getting real close to 11. And I'm like, I got to go. And so he gobbles again on his own. And now he's back to where he started. So I was like, okay, guys, we're going to go after him. We're either going to spook him or kill him. And spook him we did. So we swung around and had a little bit of a miscalculation on my map. So we swung up pretty close to the food plot. We could see the food plot through the woods. I glass up into it through the woods. 2 hens are still out there feeding. No sign of the gobblers. So I don't know if we bumped them from a long ways off, because the woods are still open at this point to where you can get busted from a really long ways by a turkey. So we swing around them. We get on the ridge point with the gobbler that was coming to us, and we swing around and get close to him. And we ended up getting a little bit too close. Like I thought, I got confused kind of where we were at, and we went probably like 30 yards too far. And I don't know if he just left or if he saw us, but we never got another response. And we kind of had to pull out, and that was that hunt. So it was a good hunt, but man, Sam, we were sitting on that turkey, and he was like, he had his gun up and everything. And after like 5 or 6 minutes of waiting, he kind of turned his head to me. He's like, turkey hunting is hard. And I was like, yeah, dude, it is. But on the walk out, both of them were like, just talking about how much fun it was, because they've been deer hunting really hard this year. I mean, they really get after it. Both of them, you know, like Blakely, she goes out by herself even and hunts, and they've been hunting super hard. And they were like talking about how much more fun they were having turkey hunting, and we kind of had a discussion about that. I'm like, yeah, for me, like deer hunting is more of like a long-term strategic goal. You know, it's all, like, to me, like killing a nice buck is probably more satisfying than killing a big turkey. But the turkey hunt is more of like in the moment fun. It's more of the adrenaline dump. And the way I put it to them, I'm like, with deer hunting, you're like sitting trying to ambush something, and you plan it for like months even. You scout and you do all this stuff. And a lot of it, you're just sitting there with like turkeys. You're like, you're actively hunting them like a bobcat. You know, you're out there doing your thing, like chasing them. And so it's two different kinds of hunting. I'm like, it's fun to break it up. And that's why I like turkey hunting so much is because after all deer season where you're like racking your brain on this and that, it's fun to be able to go out. And like I explain it, like I feel like I'm a kid again. I'm like crawling around in the woods, like chasing these things. And so they got a taste of that, and hopefully kind of lit their fire a little bit. They seemed super excited. They were real appreciative of hunting. So of me taking them hunting, they're like, we learned so much. So hopefully they're going to get a bird this year. We're gonna keep at it. But that same morning, you were out on some public, and you had an awesome hunt.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I went out on some public. It was open day of public's. It was opening day of the public land season, which, you know, it kind of. I mean, as if you just have public land to hunt, it kind of sucks because you're seeing all these guys hunting private land and they're killing birds. You're like, we can't start. Like, oh, you gotta wait. Well, finally it opened, and I was texting Shane, our buddy Shane Parker, and him and Michael Pike went hunting on one of his pieces of property, one that, you know, some of them that he's got access to, and others like another that he actually owns. And they had some really good hunts, but they didn't end up killing any birds. And I told Shane I scouted one of my spots and didn't hear any birds. Found some sign, but didn't hear any birds on some of the public that I was interested in going to go hunting. And he said, "Man, you just need to come up here and go hunt this area." I'm like, "Dude, okay." I'm like, "I haven't been up there in years, but you know, we used to hunt in like that kind of area, that area." So I drove up, met him, and then he was telling me, he's like, "Yeah, one of my buddies, he's here, and he's actually camping up here on the property kind of up throughout through the public. So it's like when you get there, out open the gate for you, you can drive in, park next to him, and then kind of walk up to this ridge line and kind of listen from. So we did that. I pulled up, and when I got there, ended up actually ran into some listeners at the gate, which was funny enough. Some non-resident boys, and
Where were they from?
Virginia.
Dang.
So I was sitting there talking to one of the guys, and the second I said something to him, he's like, "Man, are you Jacob Myers?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, dude, I love y'all's podcast. I'll watch it on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. Watch y'all's videos." I'm like, "Cool, dude." And
That's awesome.
Anyways, I just told him like the landowner, because they were parking in front of the gate, and I was like, first, we don't block any of the gates you park in front of. Like, they got signs on there. You can't. It's hard to read them on like the gates and around the gates on a lot of the public. There should be signs, not to block them. But I was like, hey, landowner's going to get here in a little bit, and he's going to open the gate. And we're going to go back in there. He's like, okay, cool.
Did you run them off?
No, I was like, if y'all want to hunt in there, it's fine. But I just told him that Shane's buddy Brian's camping back in there. I'm like, I don't know where everybody's planning on hunting, but I was like, hey, I'm going up to that ridge right there. And I was like, if y'all want to go in, great. You hunt next to the road. If you want to hunt across the road, whatever y'all want to do is fine. But I'm just letting you know that they're going to be here in a little bit to open the gate up. So they're like, all right, cool. So Shane got there, opened the gate up. I drove in, parked next to Brian. And when I get out of the truck, I just had my truck on, but I had my headlights cut off. And I get out, and he gets out too. And he's like, I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? And he just comes up to me, he starts whispering. He's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, I was like, he's like, hey, I'm like, I started whispering too. I was like, hey, you're Shane's buddy, right? And he's like, oh yeah, Brian. I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm like, I guess if we're whispering, there's probably turkeys roosted pretty close to us. And he's like, oh yeah. So
that's great.
He's like, they're roosted like all around this area. And he started pointing. He was like, see that pine tree right next to us? I'm like, yeah. He's like, we came in here on Saturday when they were hunting one of the properties, and he's like, we busted a gobble that was roosted right there in that tree, like right next to the road. Oh. And I'm like, oh crap. He's like, yeah. Anyway, so I ended up turn my truck off when he sat there and talked for a while. And anyways, he was kind of telling me his game plan and kind of like where he was going to go, and he knew kind of the ridge I was going to go up on and stuff. So we were kind of game planning, and we ended up getting our gear together and walking up, and I was going to kind of walking with him. He was going to split off one way. I was going to split off another way, kind of hit a little road bed, go up, and then get up on the ridge. And again, we've hunted in there, a little bit in the past. And he's like, just heads up, when you're walking in, he's like, you're going to be probably walking by a couple turkeys. But he's like, you need to get that high ground, because he's like, they're staying on the high ground, once they come off the roost. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Got up there and got situated kind of up in a little saddle to listen out of. And at 6 o'clock in the dot, like I got up there at like maybe 5:30, was just hanging out. Found a tree to sit up against. And at 6 o'clock, started hear the first gobble. And it was literally gobbling from 6 o'clock to, there was birds gobbling from 6 a.m. to 8:45, just gobbling their heads off. So I ended up at like maybe 6:15 after I heard a few birds. One gobbled, and he was on the ridge point right next to me on the other side of the saddle on this little knob. And I'm like, oh, like he's close. Like he gobbles like clear gobble. You could hear like the rattle in his chest. I'm like, he's probably 200 yards maybe, just like the way it sounds and like kind of where he's at.
Yep.
And anyway, so I was like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm like, I'm going to wait till he flies down, see which way he goes. Hopefully he doesn't come my direction, because it's pretty open woods between me and that knob he was up on. And I'm like, hopefully he goes off another secondary ridge point. And then my game plan is, or what I was thinking is, I'm going to work my way down. And at first I was like, I was going to set up right down the saddle. But then I was thinking, I'm like, ain't no way. I'm like, if Andrew was here, he's like, we ain't sitting in this freaking saddle. Like, you're going to get busted. Like, that's already, he's going to hang up at 90 yards from you, 100 yards. So he got down, he flew down, and I didn't hear him fly down, but I could hear him gobbling from the ground now. And he was kind of over the next lip. And I'm like, okay, good. And I'm like, let him gobble. He gobbled maybe 8 times. He didn't gobble a whole bunch, but he gobbled a few times on the ground. I'm like, all right, I'm going to make my move. And while I'm making this move, I hear other turkeys gobbling, but he was the closest one to me. And like Shane was saying, and I had this mindset too going on there. He's like, I wouldn't chase any birds, to be honest, because like if you leave like that high ground, you're gonna have another bird gobbling from up there within an hour. So I'm like, this one's this close, and he's working off in a place that's pretty good. I think I can ambush, get in a good position, and then call him back over one of these secondary points and get a shot at him. So I worked my way up, hit the first secondary ridge point right there below right where he was roosted at, and found a nice oak tree to get set up on. And I was set up. The high ground is kind of like off my left shoulder, and I'm kind of facing the crest of the secondary ridge point. I'm kind of sitting off one side of it, and the crest of it's like 25 yards from me. And I was too nervous of like popping up over and sitting where I could shoot the other side of it because I'm like, he might just be right there. But it was so steep. If I stopped 40 yards from where I had sat, it would have been like shooting like this, like aiming like way up at him, and like he could telescope up and look over the top, and you might not even be able to get a shot. So ended up, again, I set like 25 yards from the crest of that ridge, and did one call sequence with the wing bone, and then a couple soft yelps on my mouth call, and not 5 minutes later, I hear it just walking and like coming towards me. It's like, and I'm like, this is a repeat of last year. This is what happened last year. Last year, I killed one on second day of public land season. Same setup, went in right where they were roosted at. First call sequence, they never gobbled. Just I could hear them walking, spun around the tree, and they were right there at 25 yards. And 3 birds shot one of them. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, he's coming right at me. So, dude, I'm like sitting there, and I get that gun swung around exactly where that sound seems like it's coming from, and I have like another big oak tree in front of me. So I'm like, crap, what side is he on? So I'm like, kind of like, I just got to pick one side. So I picked one side, and dude, it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And dude, I'm shaking. My gun is doing this, dude. All the YouTube people can see me. I'm just like, dude, that gun is all over the place. And I'm like, keep it together. I was just kept telling myself, keep it together, okay? Like, you cannot whiff on a 25-yard shot on a turkey, okay? And it just kept walking, getting loud. And then I could start hearing drumming, just like boom, boom. And I'm like, he's about to get busted. Okay, he's got to get his
knock him in the head.
So I had that gun up, looked through that red dot, and then all of a sudden I see a turkey pop up, and I was like, oh. And it was like a little bit to my right, but I was like, oh, it's a hen. Hen popped up. And I can still hear the drumming, and she's like right on the crest of it. She's just like kind of looking around, just kind of scratching, whatever.
Oh, she's scouting the place out.
Yeah, and she's kind of scratching, and then she like kind of looks over at me, and I'm just kind of like not looking at her directly. I'm just like looking down the gun, still right where I hear like the main walking at. And she turns and kind of like starts like going up the edge of that ridge line, up the edge of the secondary point, just where I couldn't see her, and I can still hear the spitting and drumming. And I'm like, he's about to pop out, and he never does. And I'm like, crap. And then I can hear them. They're like walking back up to my left, kind of going up in elevation, back up to that knob. And I'm like, dude, he's gonna circle me, and he's gonna bust me from like up above, like look right down at me. And I'm like, I won't be able to move. So as they're kind of walking off, I'm like, I'm gonna get up on my knees, and I'm gonna stand up, crouch up, because I'm thinking he's like 35 yards, and just like ease up over and just shoot. So I get on my knees and start to stand up, and they're not there. They've already crested over the other secondary ridge point below the knob, and they've walked up and behind. I'm like, crap. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna hang out. I'm gonna reposition, but I'm gonna hang out right here. So I reposition now where I can shoot both sides of the secondary point, because what I realized after the fact, that you could tell it's on X, but that point when it came off that knob, there's big drainage on my side, and there's another drainage on the other side of the secondary point, and then the third secondary point comes out. So if I would have went up and like just crested that little knob and sat right there, I could have shot 45 yards down onto that secondary point, the one that I think they came up from, and around the head of the drainage and everything. So I ended up sitting right there, waited like 20 minutes, and nothing. Still some turkeys gobbling, but they're far off. And did another call sequence with the wing bone, and it was muggy that morning, like real muggy. It was overcast, and it was like almost misting rain. It was like fog would come in, like not really where I'm at, but I'm like looking across, and I'm like, there's like fog coming in, and I'm like, I can't believe, like, they're gobbling good, but I'm like, it feels like a terrible morning for gobbling activity. Yeah. And did another call and sequence, waited another 20 minutes, and I'm like, I'm sitting here till at least 9 and seeing if this bird will kind of work back in after he gets off with his hens. And I keep hearing this gobbler below me, probably, I mean, it might have been 500-600 yards away gobbling. He was gobbling at another bird. And then I can tell he's coming my way. And I'd call, and like I never got any like quick responses to any of my calls. It was like almost like a delayed response. I'm like, is it gobbling at me? Is it gobbling at something else? He's just gobbling on his own. And I told Joe Ham this, and he's like, Joe was hunting the same day. Turkeys did the exact same thing with him. He got on a bird, and he's like, I'd call at him, and it'd be like a 10-second delay, and then he'd gobble. And I'm like, is he gobbling at me? Is he gobbling at something else? And he's like, he's gobbling at me, but he's just not that fired up. I'm like, all these turkeys were like that. Like, you'd call at them, and it'd be like a delay of maybe like 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then they'd gobble. And this one I can hear, he's coming on a beeline, kind of coming up the side of the ridge. And but now I'm like not in a super great spot because now he's coming from the backside, the super steep face from me, which is like 90 yards down to the bottom that he's going to have to cross. So I'm like, crap. So I just shut up. And then after 10 minutes, I start hearing that gobbler clucking, like real loud. I can't do it, but like real loud, like hollow,
loud.
And I can hear it. And he's like in some thick stuff on the little roadbed, the little logging roadbed I walked in on. And I'm like, I could hear her walking. I'm like, I was looking. I'm like, I was sitting there. I'm like, I can't see him. There ain't no way he can see me. So I had my binos up. And I was just looking through that stuff, and I could never see him. And finally, he just walked off. I don't know how close he got. And ended up sitting there again. Heard a few more birds, but I ended up moving at like 9:40 because we had a call at noon that I knew I had to be out of there, and I didn't have cell signal. Was at where I was at, so I was going to have to go get cell signal. So I went up the backside of the knob. Actually, I went up on the knob to kind of see what the roost site and stuff was. And, dude, it was trash. Dude, there was fresh droppings everywhere. It was all scratched out. Like, you could tell the trees they were roosting in. And I'm like, okay, cool. Pin drop. I understand this. Went off the backside and got my crow call out. And did one crow call sequence on, like, ka. Nothing. Did again, a little more intensity. And I had one gobble across the next drainage all the way onto this next ridge, and he gobbled like right at me. And I was like, it's 9:45, almost 10 o'clock. He's probably 600 yards from me, and I'm like, it's going to take me a minute to get over there, just how steep some of that stuff was, kind of getting back up to where he was at. And I was just debating, I'm like, am I going to go after him or am I not going to go after him? And I'm like, I'm an idiot for not going after him, because at this point, all the other turkeys, about like 9 o'clock, everything shut up. So I'm like, I'm going to go after him. So I did. I started going off the edge, down a ditch, down a drainage. There was scratchings everywhere, fresh scratching. Get down the bottom, fresh scratching everywhere. Start going up the next ridge line, and it's just rocky, nasty ridge. And it was steep enough that I had to find a ditch to go up, because like the face of it, like I didn't wear my best boots for this hunt. Should have worn my lowest with like a lot more aggressive tread. I'm wearing my Crispies that have like worn out tread on. So they're pretty slick on like, steep ground or like soft ground. And anyways, I had to inch my way up there, but like I got all the way up on top, crow called again, and 2 gobbled. One right here on this at the very tip of this little ridge point as it goes up towards like a bigger ridge, and then one was like down on the bottom on the next bottom over from me. So it was the bottom each side of the ridge, and one was down on that bottom and gobbled. And I'm like, crap. We're like, cool. We got 2 birds, and I start weaving my way through these trees and everything. And I work another 100 yards, and a crow call again, nothing. Crow call again, nothing. And I'm like, I've got to be within 200 yards of the birds, but I didn't like the setup. It was kind of like thick where I was at, like down trees and just nasty stuff. And I'm like, I need to get in a better area where they can approach. And I'm like, the one in the bottom, I don't know if he can come up to me. I mean, it's steep as crap between me and him. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear, like, I think it's the first time I've ever heard gobbler yelps, just like, I mean, going crazy, and then fighting purrs, wings flap. I can hear stuff walking around down that bottom. And I'm like, at first I was like, is that Jake's? Like, it sounded like just Jake's going after it. And afterwards, I found out it was gobblers, because Shane was on the other ridge from me, and he was actually at one point watching him and try to kill one of those birds. It was a group at Longbeards together. But I ended up, I sat up and called, and never got any of the birds to respond. Sat up there for like 30 minutes, and by this time it's like 10:45, and I'm like, it's going to take me a minute to get out of here, plus go get cell service. So I hiked out, didn't strike anything on the way out to the truck, and talked to Brian when I got back to the truck, and he was telling me about his crazy shenanigans that morning. Like, he took the safety off 2 or 3 times on 3 different birds, and he got set up right between like on a high spot between 3 different secondary points, and birds were on each one of them gobbling and roosting, and pretty much called in each one of those birds. He had one at 30 yards on the side of the ridge, just like me, where like he couldn't shoot it, but he could hear it walking, spitting, drumming, and gobbling. And he's like, I couldn't even like sit up high enough to shoot at him. It was like too steep on the side he was on. And that bird worked off. And then he called in another one to 40 yards but it was coming through like a lot of like this nasty like brush. And he's like, he was in there, and he was like, he said the turkey just sat in there, and he was like just moving his head back and forth, like just looking through all that like down timber. And he's like, I thought I could have shot him, but he's like, dude, it was such a small window, and it was like 40 yards, and I'm like, I just don't know how many pellets I could get in the bird. So he's like, he ended up just not taking the shot, and he kind of just worked off. And then he had another one that he kind of like pie faced at one point. Kind of got in a little bit too close, but yeah, it was a cool hunt. But it made me think. I'm like, the setup is everything. That was my biggest takeaway of that hunt, is like, if I would have just inched up, I mean, I was pretty cautious because I didn't want to bump the bird in case he was right there, but I sat there for a little bit listening. I never could hear anything walking or drumming or anything like that. And I should have just inched up to the point where I could see in that first setup, I could see over to the next secondary ridge point and kind of sit in that little flat. If I would have sat 2 trees over, like 10 yards further over, I could have shot all that. And probably kill that turkey.
Yeah. Man, that's tough. But, I mean, as far as interactions go, that's about as good of a morning as you could ask for, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, you screw one up, it doesn't work out, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one.
Yep.
That's awesome, for real. I'm jealous of that hunt. Actually, I got my days mixed up. On the day that I hunted with Sam and Blake, you were, like, sick that morning or something.
Yeah.
You ate too many hot wings. You almost...
Oh, I felt terrible. I woke up and I was like,
yeah, because we went the morning before that, you almost had a blowout.
Oh yeah,
like Piper. Piper turns 1 on the day that this drops. My daughter is 1-year-old today, baby. On the day this drops, 1-year-old. I can't believe that. But she's a baby. Sometimes she has a blowout. Any parent knows what a blowout is. Jacob almost had a blowout when we were out the other morning. Yeah, you had some food that didn't agree with you the night before.
Yeah,
and a little emergency.
I had to take a quick stop at the check-in pinout board first. Then we start walking out to go hunt, and we went to one spot to listen from. And even when we were there, I was like, kind of had the bubble guts a little bit. God, it'll pass.
Brutal.
And then we start working down this other logging road towards where we had heard some gobbles, like real far off. And dude, we're coming to this low spot, and like you're ahead of me, probably like 30, 40 yards. I was like trying to whistle at you or something.
I was like, what's taking him so long? And I turn around and you're looking at me and you just squat down and waddle off into the woods.
Yeah, I'm like, we gotta go. We gotta go bad. And yeah,
you had a tummy attack?
Tummy attack.
That's what Blakely calls it.
Yeah, it was bad. It was very bad.
God, that's so funny.
And then afterwards, I got back up to you. I was like, hey, you got any extra toilet paper?
I was like, yeah.
I don't need it now, but we might need it in about an hour. So thankfully, didn't need to go to that.
Gosh, dude.
That was rough. That was super rough.
Yeah. Before we get to the Q&As, so that was opening day of public in Alabama. That same day, I went by myself, and I literally could only hunt till like 7:30 in the morning because it was on a Monday. Mm-hmm. And I went out to roughly the same area where we had gotten on those turkeys with Sam and Blake. And I get out there, and I'm trying to get on this ridge point before daylight, like way before daylight, because I know that they're there. Like, I know they're going to be there. They roost there every year. They were there last year a bunch. I've already confirmed they're still using it this year. So I'm like, they're going to be there. I just need to get there early. Mm-hmm. Didn't get in quite as early as I wanted, and it was kind of a bright night too. So as I was going out there, like the moon is pretty bright. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm in here quite early enough, because like when it's kind of bright like that, at least this is my thought, I want to get in like while the turkeys are literally still asleep, like head under the wing asleep, And it was so bright that I'm like, if it's kind of like that, not even gray light yet, but there might be a bird or two chirping like 5 o'clock in the morning. You're a good hour plus from gobble time. It's dark, but there's some critters starting to wake up. And so I don't know if that turkey's already awake or not, because if their head's up and they've already woken up and they're already kind of looking around a little bit, they could see you in that moonlight. So I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go all the way in there. And I get pretty close to the spot. And the way this spot sets up, it's 2 ridge points, kind of like your fingers if you make a peace sign. And your pointer finger is the shorter ridge point, and your middle finger is the longer one. I'm trying to get on the longer one. And I'm kind of working to it, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to just walk out on the middle. So I go down towards the shorter ridge point, your pointer finger, which is also a little bit lower. It's like maybe 40 feet lower in elevation. So I'm like, I could go and get on that ridge point and then cross the valley in between your fingers and get on the taller ridge point and just ease up to the top, crest over the hill, and sit right on the tip top and be like, right, I'm going to be like danger close to these turkeys. And I get, there's a power line that runs through there, and I got close to that power line, and I was like, I don't know if I should cross this power line right now, because the closer I got, the more I'm like, actually, there could be turkeys roosted on this other one too, on your pointer finger, you know? And so I'm like, I'm just going to sit here and hang out for a second and see what they do. So I sit down about 30 yards off the edge of the power line, and about 6:15 on the dot, bam, one hammers right on the taller ridge, so on your middle finger. And like, he's close, like you can hear the rattle in his chest and everything, and I'm like, okay, we're in business. And he gobbles a couple times on his own. It starts getting closer to about 6:30, and I can hear some hens in there already. So I'm like, okay, this is getting, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And I get up, and I'm about to go make that move. So now I'm just going to swing around. Now I know where he's at. He's like, if he's on your middle finger, if you're making the peace sign, he's like on your middle knuckle, roughly.
You use your left hand, by the way, too.
Yeah, I'm using my left hand. So he's on like the middle knuckle of your middle finger, the big knuckle. And I'm like, well, I'll just go around my pointer finger and go around the tip of it and get on the tip of my middle finger and come up that. So I've got a little bit of distance between us, and I'm going to get on his ridge that way. Use the terrain to cover me because the woods are still kind of open. And right before I cross that power line, I'm like, maybe I ought to just hoot just to see. And my voice is already kind of going at this point, so I try to hoot, and it's like the worst. I'm so glad you weren't there filming. It was like, it was bad. But I do it, and dude, one hammers right next to me. I mean, about blew my hat off.
Like on your side of the power line?
No, he's on the other side, but he's like 50 yards from me, because he's literally right on the other side of the power line, and I'm on the edge of the power line. And he's like, it's one of those where he gobbles so close where I'm like, oh crap, how has he not seen me yet? And I'm like looking up in the trees trying to see him, and I don't see him. And so I literally like walk backwards very slowly to the tree I got up from, and literally just like very slowly sink down on that tree and sit back down. And that bird doesn't gobble again. And eventually about 10 minutes go by, and I hear the wing beats. I hear him fly down. And I'm like, all right, he's on the ground. So I give him, I don't even know, maybe 10, 15 minutes, just trying to see what they do. Because now I'm thinking, okay, I need this bird to kind of drift off so I can go get across this power line, because I don't want to try to call him across the power line, because I don't know if they're going to cross it or not. And some hens end up yelping over there, and the turkeys are gobbling at it, and they're kind of like, it's turning out to be a really good gobbling morning. And the hens kind of sound like they're going over the hill, and they seem like the original gobbler and the hens kind of seem like they've gone over the hill. And so I get out my call, and I yelp a couple times, and the bird that was roosted in front of me has now drifted way down the ridge. So he's like, again, he started like close up to my knuckle on my pointer finger. Now he's like almost off the point. Like he's pretty far. And I yelp a couple times, and he hammers it. And so I'm like, okay. And within 30 seconds, he gobbles again, and another one gobbles. And I call at him again. I probably should have taken the opportunity to jump up and run up there, but I wasn't sure if they were on my pointer finger ridge or if they were on the middle finger ridge and on like the side of that. So I'm like, if I pop out here, there's a really good chance I'm going to bump them, because those woods again are so open that if I just go get across there, even if they're 150 yards through the woods, there's a good chance they're going to see me and I'm never going to see them. So I was like, I'm just going to have to try to call them over here. Because again, if I had more time this morning, I would have, played the slow game and let them really drift off and then made a move on them. But I only had till about 7:30, and it's getting close to 7 at this point. So I wait for them to gobble again on their own, and as soon as they gobble, I cut them off, and I'm like, pop, 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 yap, yap, yap. and I'd do a cut and run kind of sequence. And dude, when I did that, they came unglued. They were like pow, pow, pow. They're both up. There was two of them together, just hammering. I was like, oh my gosh! And so they do that. They're way off. They were like pretty far, and within a minute, they are on the edge of that power line, gobbling in my face, dude. They're like 65 yards or so, 70 yards. And like they must have run up the ridge point because they closed that distance so fast. And so I like got the gun up and I'm like watching. And they're like, they stand there. I can hear them drumming. I can hear them walking.
Can't see them.
Can't see them. I hear them walking and I'm like, like walking fast.
Yeah.
And I flip the safety off and everything, and I'm getting ready, and the walking stops, and I'm kind of waiting, and after a minute or so, they gobble. And I mean, they are right there. And they basically stand there and gobble for like 20 minutes. They will not cross that freaking power line. They're standing either right on the edge or they're like in the power line. And I could see the power line, but there's like a patch of really young pines right there on the edge of it. And I can't see like quite through that patch. And the patch is only like 10 yards wide, but they're right on the other side of it. And I'm thinking they're going to come around the edges or just walk right through it because it's not like thick. It's like visually I can't see through it, but it's not something a turkey wouldn't walk through. And dude, they just stood there and walked back and forth hammering. Then
you Jake yelp at all?
No, because what comes up out of the bottom but a Jake.
Oh, really?
Jake yelp.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the first time in a long time I've actually heard like a Jake yelp in person. And he was doing the thing. He came up and it's like that just goofy, deep, like cow, 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 like stumbling, they kind of stumble into it. And he comes up and I think he linked up with him because I could hear him from a long ways off and he kept coming and he got right on top of him. And after a while, they ended up moving off, and I could tell they were drifting back down the ridge point. So I was like, I'm going to gobble at them. So I get out the box call, and I gobble at them, and they, again, just like quadruple gobble. I mean, I don't really know even what happened because there was two birds, and I think they both gobbled twice. I was like, come on, guys. And after that, they never responded. I think they gobbled one more time, but they were still far down the ridge point, and I had to go. So what I ended up doing is after they drifted off, I actually got up and crossed the gas line to where they had been. And I just kind of looked and saw what everything looked like. And I'd been on this ridge point, but it had been a while. So I just wanted to resurvey what it looked like. And I kind of glassed way off down through the woods to see what all that looked like. And then I just left. So that's where I'm planning on going sometime soon, maybe this weekend at some point, because I know they're going to be there. They're there so consistently. So this time I'm going to get in even earlier, and I'm going to set up on their side and see what happens. So anyways, that was a really good hunt. So that was the same morning you were in the woods. And yeah, there was like a storm rolling in, like a storm front, and I didn't think they were really going to gobble that good, but they talked.
Oh, yeah.
It was good. It was really good.
Yeah, you got to hear Shane Parker talk about getting bit by a copperhead twice that morning, too.
Yeah, we'll have Shane back on soon to talk about that.
Yeah.
You were telling me that, and Shane got hit by a copperhead this fall. Like, he wears snake boots, but I'm like, Shane is messing with these snakes. There's no way. There's no way that he's just like happenstance getting bit. I'm like, Shane, quit poking him with your boot or something. Like, nobody gets messed with that much by freaking snakes.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, we had a good laugh about that.
The luck of the draw. But other than that, appreciate everybody for leaving Q&As. We're going to kind of go through some Q&As here. So if you're curious about, maybe want to submit a Q&A, whether it's turkey hunting or deer hunting related, there's a link down in the show notes below. You can actually hit that on either audio feed of the podcast, if you're listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform, or also on YouTube. You can click it and then get those submitted, and then we'll answer those on these Thursday episodes. So.
All right, this one is from Austin Reed from Alabama. Austin, I remember meeting you at the Weavers Meetup event in Hartsville, Alabama. It was awesome talking to you. Austin he was the one that stayed like to the end, and we stayed for a long time and talked to him. It was a good time, great conversation. Appreciate you sticking around and talking to us, my man. And we got to talk about this at the event, actually, but we're going to bring it up on the podcast. He said, "Hey guys, been listening for several months now and have tried to catch up on most of the quote-unquote greatest hits episodes from the past. I recently listened to the episode with Rick Cope One of the discussion points was hunting the different moon phases. While I fall in the category of most hunters and only have a few days to hunt at most each week and have to make the best of the hand I'm dealt, I have a theory on why some people may see more evidence to support the moon phase than others. It could be that the deer are choosing certain food sources over others due to the actual brightness of the moon or the lack thereof. For instance, on a darker night, like a new moon, could the deer be selecting a forage type that is in less open areas like cutovers or high stem count hardwoods? The reason I have this theory is mainly due to predators like coyotes. I know that deer can see somewhat at night, much better than we can, but it would make sense that they would avoid areas with less cover even at night on certain nights that give the coyotes a greater advantage. And in return, wait until closer to daylight or even well into daylight hours to go into those more open areas to hit the feed trees. This could also apply to storm systems, with there being more forage in a smaller area or an adjacent to like a bedding or a cutover. They could be choosing to hit the feed trees on the days leading up to the storm fronts, knowing that they will be more than likely not back in those areas for a few days. Basically, get while the getting is good and conserve calories on the days that are less optimal or present more of a threat. What are your thoughts? Keep up the great work. I've learned more from you guys in a few months, and I haven't a lifetime of hunting the wrong way. And see you guys Saturday at Weaver's. So, again, great seeing you at Weaver's. What are your thoughts? This is a really interesting thought.
No, I mean, I guess that can definitely make sense. I've had somebody, I'm trying to think, I think somebody, we've had a conversation about that before. I don't know if it was on the podcast or just talking to someone individually about.
It was Rick. It was Rick Cope that talked about this.
Well, talking about like the brightness. I'm talking about like specifically from like the brightness of like a.
Oh yeah, I guess he was talking like overhead underfoot.
No, yeah, I'm thinking more so like on the brightness aspect of like deer going to specific areas and feeding in specific habitat types. If they can see even better at night, like a full moon versus like a new moon when it's completely dark out, and selecting specific cover for it. So I mean, I don't know. I mean that could. But I mean, it's a good theory. It's like anything, even with the moon. It's a good theory, and if you can find evidence of that, whether it's through trail cameras, personal experiences, stuff like that, I mean, something to go off of. So
yeah, I could see it being. I mean, it's a really, really interesting food for thought. Like essentially, that on those really dark nights, like they don't want to go get out in the middle of a big open area because it's harder for them to see. Because like we've talked about that deer, especially in the southeast where we got an abundance of thick cover, I feel like they like to use like sound to their advantage. So like they get in that thick cover because nothing can get to them without making a bunch of sound. And like even sitting next to those thickets though, I've heard bobcats. Like even a bobcat makes sound going through that stuff.
The term would be noise, not sound.
Whatever, noise, sound, same thing. Whatever.
They make sound. I've never heard somebody say that phrase before.
They start making sound.
So it's like, yeah.
Anyways.
I learned you something new today.
I learned you something. That's how we say it around here, son. No, that's interesting, man. Maybe we'll ask some more people about that because I think we're getting Rick Cope back on for sure. His episode just did good. Did really good. Smashed. So
what else we got?
All right, this is from Mark Carmichael in Alabama. He said, "Hey, Andrew, a while back, if I remember right, you said you did not like shooting a rifle out of your saddle. And on one of the recent podcasts, you mentioned that Jacob gave you some pointers on shooting out of a saddle. And now you said you said you feel way more comfortable shooting a rifle out of the saddle. What did Jacob tell you with your rifle shooting out of a saddle? By the way, this is Mark that came by your house to look at painting your kitchen cabinets. Still love the podcast. Mark, what's up, man? My man." Okay, I got a funny story about Mark. Mark, I'm going to tell this on the podcast. My wife, Tiffany, was reaching out to him to have him come like paint our cabinets in our kitchen. And I think she got like a recommendation or something. But she texted him. She's like, "Hey, my name's Tiffany Maxwell. We live in so-and-so town." And Mark thought he was texting his son, but he accidentally texted Tiffany back. And he's like, "Hey, this is Tiffany. This is Tiffany Maxwell in so-and-so town. Do you think that's Andrew Maxwell's wife? Like from the Southern Outdoorsman? And then he realized he texted Tiffany. He was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But we got a great laugh out of it. And he came by the house and we talked. Like it was awesome, man. So, Mark, appreciate you, dude. That was awesome. We still haven't painted our cabinets, by the way. That one fell on the back burner. but if we do paint them, you're getting the first call, my man. So what did you tell me about shooting out of the saddle?
So it's really simple. We're going to have to shoot a video on this probably sometime this summer for you guys to get a visual representation of how it works. But if you're, if y'all are especially watching on YouTube right now, it's going to be a little bit easier to describe. But if you're an audio listener, imagine you're sitting there, in your saddle, you're facing your tree. You have your bridge of your saddle that, again, comes off your left hip and your right hip, goes up to your carabiner. When you go to shoot, I personally like, especially gun hunting in a saddle, I like my tether a little bit longer. And I, again, use an adjustable tether on my saddles. So I'll have it not fully lengthen out to the max, but I'll have maybe like a couple inches of tag on that bridge. And what I'll do is, this is specifically for shooting strong side shots. So whether the shot is from, 12 o'clock to maybe, I don't know, 7 o'clock or so, kind of if you're a right-handed shooter, that'd be off your left-hand side. This is what really works for me. If you have one on your weak side shot, it's a little bit different. But for a strong side shot, what I do is hold the rifle, your left hand, if you're a right-handed shooter, you're holding the forend of the stock. You tuck your elbow, your left elbow inside that bridge. So you stick it inside the bridge, not on the outside, the inside of the bridge, and you put leverage. You once you get your elbow inside the bridge, you kind of push outward, and it kind of locks that elbow, and it's extremely stable. And then you hold your gun up from that, and it acts. In my experience, it's almost as stable as shooting off a tripod with your gun. Again, I feel very confident shooting like that out to 300 yards or so, and we'll do a video this summer actually shooting at distance that way versus up against a tree versus maybe like freehanding a shot. So that's kind of how you do it for a strong side shot. So again, tuck your elbow inside your bridge. You push outward on the bridge, so it kind of locks that elbow into place, and then you hold the gun from there, and it's extremely stable. On a weak side shot, so for a right-handed shooter on the right-hand side of your tree, so from 1 o'clock position over to maybe 5 o'clock or so, it's pretty simple. You just bring the gun over the bridge. You rest your forearm on the bridge itself. So at the cross section of the bridge below your tether, you rest your arm right there holding the gun, and you're able to pivot in your saddle in order to get that shot. The hardest shot in a saddle is the drop shot directly behind you, like your 6 o'clock position. The easiest way to do it is the pivot to the right-hand side. I'm talking about all this from a right-handed shooter. If you're a left-handed shooter, you're just doing the opposite. But from a right-handed shooter, you pivot to the right side of your platform. And again, like I mentioned earlier, you lock your arm, your left elbow inside the bridge, and you take that shot that way. So again, we'll have to do a whole video on it to kind of showcase, how I do it. But yeah, I feel way more confident shooting out of a saddle with my rifle than even out of some of my climbers. Because even in a climber, if I sit in a climber, like my Lone Wolf sit and climb, it's I've got that what's that mesh seat we've got? Hasmore mesh seat. So it sits up really high. So like you don't have like a shooting rail or anything to shoot off of, okay? Because you're not sitting way down in the stand. So if I'm in my climber, I'm shooting like potentially a far distance. Like I might have a shot 200-300 yards. I literally sit there with my backpack in my lap in order to like make that shot and shoot off my backpack. Where in a saddle, I don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. I just use the bridge to my strengths. Andrew used to do it where you would like hold the gun up against the tree.
I still do that sometimes.
Which, it can work for sure, but a lot of times it depends on how high your tether's attached to the tree. If your tethered's like forehead high, eye high, and you're leaning back to take a shot, sometimes I can't get to the tree. I feel like the bridge is in the way a little bit, where the gun like it kind of sits on the bridge.
Yeah, I think the difference there is you typically have your bridge length a lot longer than, because all the saddles we use, like we've in the past couple of years mostly used a Cruiser XC and a tethered Phantom Elite, and both of those have adjustable bridges. And so I was running a much shorter bridge and you were running a much longer bridge, and that's where the initial discrepancy came, where I wasn't that confident. because sometimes I would have trouble like either getting it on the tree or I didn't have enough bridge to like do what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I've played with it a little bit more and ended up kind of adjusting where I normally put my tether and lengthening my bridge. And this also goes to speak for like how much you can customize your actual saddle setup. Because I mean, there's an infinite possibilities of like every tree is going to be a little different. Every setup's going to be a little different, but you can put your tether at this height and make your bridge this length, or you can, lower your tether and lengthen your bridge a little bit, or whatever the combination is. And so I kind of played around with it till I got comfortable with a longer bridge, figuring out where I needed to set my tether height to have myself be comfortable with a longer bridge, and that allowed me to shoot easier out of the saddle. But yeah, we're going to do a video on it that's pretty in-depth. It's hard to explain over a podcast.
Yeah.
All right, last one, because my voice is about to go. This is from Richie Bailey in Tennessee. He said, every year I take a late season trip to Middle Tennessee, approximately 13 miles from the Alabama line. What time of year do you typically see rut activity in northern Alabama? I think it varies depending on how far east or west you are in North Alabama. But generally speaking, I think early January is it.
Yeah.
Right.
From Christmas to the second week of January.
Yeah. Most places that we've hunted at least, I think it's like, it gets good around Christmas and probably till like January 15th or so.
Yeah.
It kind of starts to slow down after January 15th, but basically first half of January is where it's at. But again, I've said it before, the DCNR, if you go to outdooralabama.com, they have a rut map, and I have found that map to be extremely accurate.
Yep.
And I've hunted just about every different rut there is in Alabama, and it's been pretty much spot on for every place I've gone. So I would look at that map. It's definitely going to be pretty accurate. And I would say, see if you can like reach out to some people who hunt around you. But man, I don't think that's that reliable. When I first joined my club, I asked 5 different guys in the club when they thought the rut was. I got 5 different answers.
Yep.
And it's taken me 2 years of being in the club to figure out when it actually is like hot.
Now, how does that match it with the rut map?
It matches up perfect. Early January. Matches up perfect.
Yeah. Trust the map.
Now, there's discrepancy in it, though, because it might give you like a 14-day time frame, but there's like, I don't know. It could fall. I mean, give yourself like 2 or 3 days, of wiggle room on either side of that. But like I had some guys tell me it's December. I had some guys say it was late January. I had some guys say it was like mid to late January. And it's just, like you get a lot of different answers because a lot of people, it depends on a lot of things, man. It depends on what kind of effort they put in at what times. Because if the rut is like, let's take it like a descent. Like there's one place in particular that I've hunted before where the rut is mid-December, the rut is rocking and rolling, right? Every year it's rocking and rolling. But I talk to some people who say, no, it's like Christmas. And I talk to other people who say, no, it's like around the 1st of December. And what it ultimately boils down to is when do they actually get to hunt? Because the guy who says it's around Christmas, they're off of work around Christmas, and that's when they're getting to hunt. And or vice versa, like the guy who's hunting like Thanksgiving to early December, he's off work, he's getting to hunt that time. So like you got to take it with a grain of salt. So like this is one of the rare instances where I'm like, you can talk to people, but if you're going to talk to people, I would try to talk to a bunch of people. I wouldn't talk to like 3 guys and try to figure out where the rut is in a spot, because it might be spot on, but a lot of times just in my travels, it's usually not. Usually you get 3 different answers.
Yep.
So if you can find, if your state, and this goes for any state, if they have a resource on conception dates, that's the best you're going to get. So if it says your conception dates are like January 12th through 15th, that means that most of your does are getting pregnant January 12th through the 15th. Then like around January 10th or January like 5th through the 10th ought to be like really good. And then a couple days after the 15th ought to be really good. Because again, the rut's like a bell curve. And, in theory, at the top of that bell curve, when all those does are getting pregnant, they're all locked down, quote unquote. And me and you have had really good luck hunting the upswing of that rut. So again, if peak conception is like the 18th, we've had really good luck around the 10th, 12th, 14th, like those dates. So that's what I would go look at. You got anything to add to that?
Nope. Spot on. Pretty simple, easy. Definitely, if you're in Alabama, definitely use that rut map. It helps out a ton, and it can be very, very valuable for you, especially if you're just trying to come down to Alabama to hunt, or if you're a resident and you're trying to hunt. It's in my experience, it's been extremely accurate.
Nice.
What you got? You got anything else?
No, that's all I got.
Okay, cool. Well,
I almost thought about doing another one, but I think we're going to wrap it with that.
Yep. Well, appreciate everybody again that's been listening to the podcast, sharing the podcast, watching the podcast on YouTube as well. I appreciate everybody as well that's been purchasing some of our Southern Outdoorsman hats. I got on the old school camo hat. Remind me, is it the Delta I've got on right now? No, it's the Marsh.
No, it's a slew.
One of them.
But the Delta is going to be coming out this summer, boy.
The Delta is going to be coming out. It's a good looking hat.
Yeah.
But anyways, appreciate everybody's been purchasing all the hats. Again, there's a link down in the show notes below to pick up some Southern Outdoorsman apparel. Again, appreciate all that support. Appreciate all the listener success stories coming in as well. So other than that, we'll catch y'all back here for Monday's episode of the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. Best of luck to you guys this weekend. And remember, y'all stay Southern.